The boy's hand went cold in the exact moment the shadow crossed the fountain. Kael didn't flinch, didn't turn, just kept his fingers wrapped around his son's small palm while the autumn breeze carried something heavier than leaves across Central Park. His other hand stayed loose at his side, close enough to the concealed blade strapped beneath his Tom Ford jacket. 5 years building Vale Industries into a tech empire worth $8 billion had taught him one truth. Power attracted wolves. And wolves always found the scent of blood. His son, Amari, stood frozen beside him, clutching a silver toy airplane against his chest, 5 years old, silver hair catching late sunlight, blue eyes that hadn't reflected joy since the night everything shattered. The child's lips parted slightly, but no sound came. It never did anymore. Behind them both, Jorah shifted his weight. 7 months pregnant. The curve of his belly pressed against the long cashmere coat he wore like armor. His face stayed blank, but Kael felt the tension radiating through the air between them. Jorah could speak. He just chose silence most days now. It was safer that way. Words got people killed. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Kael's Rolex caught light as he knelt down, eye level with Amari. The grass stained his $1,000 pants. He didn't care. Boardrooms across Illinois and Texas had seen him destroy competitors without raising his voice. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was the way Amari's breathing had gone shallow. The way the boy's knuckles had turned white around the toy. Someone was watching them. Kael had learned to feel it the same way sharks sense electricity in water. A prickling at the base of his skull. A shift in the air pressure. 3 years ago, he would have dismissed it as paranoia. But 3 years ago, he hadn't watched Jorah nearly die on a New Jersey highway with Amari screaming in the back seat. 3 years ago, he still believed money could fix anything. Now he knew better. The fountain behind them kept spilling water over marble edges, tourists laughing nearby, joggers passing in expensive sneakers. Normal. Everything looked so devastatingly normal. Black Teslas glided past the park entrance. Glass towers reflected October sunlight. Apple's flagship building gleamed in the distance. New York moved like it always did. Fast, indifferent, expensive. But something had cracked in the pattern. Kael saw it in the way the pigeons scattered 20 feet to his left. Heard it in the pause between car horns. Felt it in the way Jorah's breathing changed rhythm behind him. Amari's fingers tightened around the airplane. Kael forced his voice steady. You want to make it fly? The boy didn't answer. He never did. Speech had died the night fear became real, when headlights came from the wrong direction and metal screamed against asphalt. Therapists in Connecticut had tried. Specialists in Massachusetts had failed. The silence had roots deeper than trauma. It had become survival. Jorah stepped closer, one hand on his stomach. Protective. Vulnerable. 30 weeks along, the doctor had said. The timeline was exact, because everything about this pregnancy had to be monitored, controlled, predicted. Stress could trigger contractions. Anxiety could end everything. And right now, anxiety was walking toward them in a long black coat. Kael stood slowly. His body moved into position between the approaching figure and his family without conscious thought. Muscle memory. Instinct. The same way he'd positioned himself 3 years ago when the board tried to vote Jorah out. The same way he'd stood when photographers swarmed their car. The same way he'd learned to exist, as a wall between danger and the people who couldn't fight. The man in the black coat stopped 10 feet away. Tall, sharp jaw, custom boots that looked like Stuart Weitzman, hands in pockets. No visible weapon, but Kael had been in enough rooms with dangerous men to recognize the ones who didn't need guns. This man carried violence the way some people carried cologne. Subtle, expensive, always present. Draven. Kael knew the name. Everyone in certain circles did. Ruthless alpha, Mafia king. Underground syndicate operating between New York and Alaska, laundering money through fashion fronts, Prada, Chanel, Dior. On paper, a philanthropist. In reality, a predator who built empires in shadows. The same man who'd been accused of orchestrating the crash 3 years ago. The same man Kael had spent a fortune trying to destroy. And now he was standing 10 feet from Amari. Kael's voice came out cold. "You're bold." Draven's eyes flicked down to the boy, then back up. No smile, no threat, just calculation. "I'm not here for a fight." "Then leave." "Not yet." The air between them crystallized. Tourists kept walking, cars kept moving. The world kept spinning while two alphas stood in a park, separated by grass and history and something unspoken that felt like gasoline waiting for a match. Jorah's hand found Kael's shoulder. A warning. A plea. Don't. But Kael had already made his choice 3 years ago. He'd chosen this. The moment he refused to let Jorah disappear from his life. The moment he claimed Amari as his son, blood or not. The moment he decided some things mattered more than empires. Draven reached into his coat. Kael's body tensed, ready to break bone, ready to put himself between the gun and his family, ready to... A silver drive appeared in Draven's palm, small, engraved with Vale Industries' emblem. "This," Draven said quietly, "contains surveillance from the night of the crash." The world tilted. Kael stared at the drive, at the man holding it, at the impossible reality that nothing about this moment made sense because Draven was supposed to be the enemy, the architect, the reason Amari stopped speaking and Jorah stopped smiling and everything fell apart. But the look in Draven's eyes wasn't triumph. It was something else. Something that looked almost like anger. "The real orchestrator," Draven continued, voice flat, "wasn't me." And in the silence that followed, while Kael's brain tried to reorganize 3 years of certainty, Amari's small hand tugged his sleeve. The boy raised the toy airplane and whispered one word. "Papa." The hospital in Connecticut smelled like disinfectant and fear. Kael sat in the waiting room with his elbows on his knees, head down, Rolex ticking against the silence. 48 hours since the park. 48 hours since Draven handed him the drive and walked away without explanation. 48 hours since Amari spoke for the first time in 3 years, then went silent again like a door slamming shut. And now Jorah was in an exam room because stress had triggered contractions at 30 weeks. Too early, too dangerous, too much like everything Kael had tried to prevent. He'd built an empire on control, contracts, strategy, predictable outcomes. But you couldn't negotiate with biology, couldn't intimidate a uterus into cooperation, couldn't throw money at early labor and expect it to stop. All he could do was sit and wait. And try not to think about the silver drive currently locked in his office safe, unwatched, because opening it felt like detonating a bomb he couldn't defuse. Amari sat beside him, swinging his legs, toy airplane still clutched in both hands. The boy hadn't spoken again. Kael had tried, gentle questions, direct ones, silence every time, like that single word in the park had cost everything Amari had, and now there was nothing left. The doctor appeared in the hallway. Dr. Annika Chen, specialist, calm face, expensive shoes, the kind of person who delivered bad news like she was discussing stock options. Kael stood. "He's stable," she said. "Contractions stopped, but he needs bed rest. No stress, no travel, no—" She glanced at Amari, then back. "No additional emotional strain." Kael nodded. "Can I see him?" 5 minutes. The room was too white, too sterile. Jorah lay in the bed with monitors attached to his belly, tracking the heartbeat of a child who wasn't supposed to exist yet. His eyes were closed, but Kael knew he wasn't sleeping. Jorah didn't sleep anymore. He just closed his eyes and waited for the next disaster. Kael pulled a chair close, didn't touch him. Jorah flinched at touch these days. "Amari's fine," Kael said quietly. "Ate lunch, drew a picture of an airplane." Jorah's eyes opened, exhausted, beautiful. 7 months pregnant and still the most striking person Kael had ever seen. Soft features, long lashes, the kind of face that had made investors uncomfortable 3 years ago because they couldn't reconcile beauty with intelligence. They'd tried to destroy him for it. "The drive," Jorah whispered. His voice always sounded like that now. Fragile, like speaking too loud might shatter something. Kael shook his head. "Not now." "Kael. Not now." Jorah's hand moved to his stomach. Protective. As if he's telling the truth. Then we've spent 3 years hating the wrong person. Kael leaned back, jaw tight. And if he's lying, opening that drive gives him exactly what he wants. Which is? I don't know yet. That was the part that kept Kael awake. Draven had resources, connections, power that operated outside legal systems. If he wanted Kael dead, there were easier ways. If he wanted Jorah, he could have taken him years ago. If he wanted Amari, Kael's hands curled into fists. No, that thought didn't get oxygen. Jorah shifted in the bed, wincing. The monitors beeped. Steady. For now. "You think it's real? The surveillance?" "I think," Kael said slowly, "that 3 years ago someone tried to kill you, and our son stopped speaking, and I burned every bridge trying to find who was responsible." He met Jorah's eyes. "And now a man I've been hunting shows up in a park, hands me evidence, and walks away. Why? That's what scares me. Because people like Draven didn't do favors, didn't show mercy, didn't hand over leverage unless it served a purpose. And whatever that purpose was, Kael couldn't see it yet. Which meant he was operating blind, and blind men made mistakes." The door opened. Amari slipped inside, too small for the room, too quiet for a 5-year-old. He climbed onto Kael's lap without asking, tucked his head against Kael's chest, and went still. The toy airplane pressed between them. Jorah watched them both. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite hope, not quite grief. Something in between. "We were supposed to be safe," he whispered. Kael didn't answer. Because safety was a lie rich people told themselves. You could buy security teams, armored cars, private islands, but you couldn't buy peace. Couldn't purchase the absence of fear. Couldn't contract your way out of being hunted. 3 years ago, at a gala in New Jersey, Jorah had been publicly humiliated, accused of manipulating Kael with omega pheromones. The accusation went viral across elite circles. Investors whispered. Board members smiled with teeth. Media outlets ran stories with headlines like "Tech Billionaire's Omega Scandal" and "Pheromone Manipulation in Corporate America." Kael had stood on a stage at that gala, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than most people's cars, and watched his world fracture. Not because the accusation was true, it wasn't, but because in circles where perception was currency, truth didn't matter. And then someone tried to run Jorah off the road. Amari had been in the back seat. The investigation concluded nothing. No suspects, no evidence. Just an accident, they said. Bad timing, tragic, but these things happen. Except Kael knew accidents. He'd built his career on eliminating them, on controlling variables, on making sure chaos never touched his empire. That wasn't an accident. That was a message. And now, 3 years later, the man he'd blamed was offering answers. Kael's phone buzzed. Text from his head of security. Just 2 words. Drive authenticated. His breath stopped. Jorah must have seen it in his face because his hand reached out, trembling, and caught Kael's wrist. What? Kael looked down at Amari, still curled against his chest, then back at Jorah. The surveillance is real. The monitors kept beeping. The hospital kept humming. The world kept moving. But in that room, everything had just shifted. Because if the surveillance was real, then Draven was telling the truth. And if Draven was telling the truth, then someone else had orchestrated the crash. Someone who'd let Kael hunt the wrong man for 3 years. Someone who was still out there, still close, still watching. Jorah's face went pale. Who? Kael's thumb hovered over his phone screen. 1 call, that's all it would take. Pull up the footage, see the truth, identify the enemy. But something stopped him. Because the timing was too perfect. Draven appearing now. Jorah in the hospital now. Amari speaking now. Like pieces on a board moving according to a plan Kael couldn't see yet. He kissed the top of Amari's head. Stood carefully, keeping the boy in his arms. I need to make a call. Jorah's fingers tightened on the bedsheet. Kael! Stay here. Rest. I'll handle this. You don't know what you're handling. Kael stopped at the door, looked back. No, but I'm about to find out. He stepped into the hallway, Amari still clinging to him, and dialed a number he'd sworn never to use. Draven answered on the first ring. Took you long enough, the Mafia king said. Kael's voice came out cold. Why did you give me the drive? Silence. Then, because I don't tolerate lies tied to my name. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight. A pause. But if you're smart, you'll watch the footage before your board meeting tomorrow. How do you know about... The line went dead. Kael stood in the hospital hallway, holding his son, staring at his phone. Tomorrow's board meeting was confidential. Scheduled last minute. Only 5 people knew about it, which meant someone inside his company was feeding information to Draven, which meant the enemy wasn't just close. They were inside. 3 years earlier. New Jersey, the Grand Meridian Hotel, chandeliers the size of cars, marble floors that swallowed sound, 1,000 people in tuxedos and gowns worth more than houses, all gathered to celebrate the merger between Vale Industries and Helix Corp. Tech and luxury, innovation and legacy. $8 billion changing hands over champagne and orchestrated smiles. Jorah stood near the bar in a midnight blue suit that Kael had chosen. Elegant, understated, perfect. His hand rested on his stomach. 4 months pregnant then, barely showing, a secret they'd planned to announce after the merger closed. Everything was going exactly as planned. Until it wasn't. The first whisper started near the Louis Vuitton display. Corporate sponsors had lined the gala with luxury brands, Gucci, Hermes, Prada, excess as decoration, wealth as wallpaper. Jorah had been admiring a Hermes scarf when he heard his name. Soft, vicious. I heard he manipulated Kael with pheromones. Jorah's hand froze on the fabric. Another voice. Male, amused. Omega trick. Oldest one in the book. Surprised Kael fell for it. He's smarter than that. Not when he's thinking with his laughter. Cruel, casual. Jorah turned, saw 3 executives from Helix Corp standing 10 feet away. One of them met his eyes, smiled, raised a glass like a toast. The floor tilted. Then the microphone screeched. Everyone turned toward the stage. A man stood there. Mid-50s. Expensive suit. Confident smile. Orion Cade. CFO of Vale Industries. Kael's second in command. Trusted advisor. "Good evening," Orion said smoothly. "Before we proceed with tonight's celebration, I think we owe it to ourselves to address the elephant in the room." Silence dropped like a curtain. Jorah's heart stopped. Orion's smile widened. There have been questions about the personal relationship between our CEO and his Omega partner. Questions about influence, about decision-making, about whether certain business choices were made with clear judgment. Kael was across the room. Jorah could see him pushing through the crowd, face dark with fury. But Orion kept talking. "I want to assure everyone here that Vale Industries operates with complete transparency. And if there are concerns about undue influence, we will address them. Publicly, professionally. Because integrity matters more than—" Kael's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Orion, step down, now." Orion didn't move. "I'm simply ensuring our investors—" "Step down." The room watched, 1,000 people holding their breath. Orion's smile never wavered. "Of course, Kael. Whatever you say." He stepped off the stage, but the damage was done. Cameras had captured everything. Phones had recorded it. By morning, the footage was everywhere. News outlets, social media, investment blogs, headlines screaming about Omega manipulation and corporate scandal and billionaire drama. Jorah left the gala early, alone, because Kael had stayed to do damage control, to reassure investors, to salvage what could be saved. Amari was with a sitter at their home in Connecticut. 2-year-old then. Too young to understand. Too innocent to know his life was about to shatter. Jorah drove home in the Tesla, hands shaking on the wheel, trying to breathe through the humiliation, trying to convince himself it would pass. Scandals always did. Rich people forgot quickly. Moved on to the next drama. He was 20 minutes from home when the headlights appeared behind him. Too close. Too fast. Jorah pressed the accelerator. The Tesla responded instantly, but the car behind matched his speed, then rammed him. Metal screamed. The wheel jerked. Jorah's head cracked against the window. He tried to correct. Another impact. Harder. The Tesla spun. Guardrail rushing closer. Trees. Darkness. And then nothing. Kael got the call at 11:47 p.m. hospital. Critical condition. Car accident. He didn't remember the drive. Didn't remember the elevator. Just remembered bursting into the ICU and seeing Jorah unconscious, face bruised, monitors beeping, doctors talking about internal bleeding and possible complications with the pregnancy. And Amari, sitting in the corner, uninjured, physically fine. But his eyes were wrong, empty, like someone had reached inside and turned off a switch. Kael knelt in front of him. "Amari, buddy, are you okay?" The boy stared through him. "Amari?" "Nothing." A nurse touched Kael's shoulder. He hasn't spoken since we found him. Trauma response. It's normal. Give him time. But time didn't fix it. Days passed. Weeks. Months. Amari never spoke again. Jorah survived. Lost the pregnancy. Spent 6 weeks in recovery. Came home different. Quieter. Like he'd left part of himself on that highway. The investigation found nothing. No other vehicle. No witnesses. Just tire marks and broken glass, and a conclusion that Jorah had been driving too fast. But Kael knew. Someone had tried to kill him, and the only person who'd publicly attacked Jorah that night was already being protected by the board. Orion claimed he'd been trying to help, to address concerns before they became problems. Investors believed him. The merger went through. Orion stayed CFO, and Kael had no proof, so he looked elsewhere. Draven's name came up in whispers. Ruthless Alpha, Mafia connections, history of eliminating threats. Someone mentioned he'd been at the gala. Someone else said they'd seen him talking to Helix Corp executives. It fit. Draven had motive, opportunity, resources. Kael spent 3 years building a case, hiring investigators, tracking financial trails, looking for the connection that would prove Draven orchestrated everything. He never found it. Because he was looking at the wrong man, present day. Kael's office, 2 a.m. The surveillance footage played on the screen. Timestamp, 3 years ago. Location, New Jersey Highway. Camera angle, traffic cam. Kael watched Jorah's Tesla driving normally. Then another car appeared. Black sedan, no plates visible. It accelerated, rammed the Tesla once, twice. The Tesla spun, crashed. The sedan kept driving. Kael rewound, zoomed in, caught a glimpse of the driver, and his blood went cold. Because he recognized that face. Not Draven, Orion, his CFO, his trusted advisor, the man who'd stood on a stage and humiliated Jorah. The man who'd attended Amari's 3rd birthday party and smiled and brought gifts. The man who'd been inside Kael's company for 8 years. Kael's hands shook. He grabbed his phone, dialed his head of security. I need everything on Orion Cade. Financials, communications, travel records, everything, and I need it now. Sir, it's 2 a.m. Now. He hung up, stared at the frozen image on the screen. Orion's face behind the wheel. Clear as daylight. 3 years. 3 years of hunting the wrong man while the real enemy sat across from him in board meetings. 3 years of Jorah living in fear while Orion shook his hand. 3 years of Amari's silence while the man responsible walked free. Kael's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Now you know. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Draven. Kael typed back, why help me? The response came immediately. Because I know what it means to protect an Omega carrying your future, and I don't let anyone else take credit for my work. Kael stared at the message. Then it hit him. Draven hadn't helped him out of kindness. He'd helped because someone had framed him, used his reputation, let Kael chase shadows while the real orchestrator stayed hidden. And Draven didn't tolerate that. This wasn't mercy. It was pride. A Mafia king's version of clearing his name. Kael looked back at the screen, at Orion's face, at 3 years of lies. His next board meeting was in 6 hours, and Orion would be there. The boardroom smelled like leather and old money. 10 chairs, glass table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Vale Industries' executive floor. The kind of room where billion-dollar decisions happened over coffee that cost more than minimum wage. Kael sat at the head of the table, calm, composed, Rolex catching morning light. Tom Ford's suit pressed sharp enough to cut. He looked like a man in complete control. He wasn't. Orion sat 3 chairs down, perfectly groomed, confident smile, tablet in front of him displaying quarterly projections. He'd been CFO for 8 years, managed the merger, navigated the scandal, kept investors happy when everything threatened to collapse. Loyal, trustworthy, essential, a lie in expensive clothing. Kael's head of security had delivered the files at 4 a.m. shell companies in Illinois, offshore accounts, payments to a private investigator who'd fed information to media outlets 3 years ago, in email chains discussing Omega problem and reputation management, and footage, traffic cam, Orion behind the wheel, ramming Jorah's Tesla, attempted murder, corporate sabotage, conspiracy, enough to bury him. But Kael hadn't moved yet, because destroying Orion publicly would raise questions. How did you get this footage? Why did a Mafia king give it to you? What else are you hiding? The board would panic, investors would scatter, stock prices would crash, Vale Industries would bleed, and Kael had spent 8 years building this empire. He wasn't going to let it fall just to watch Orion burn. So he'd called a different meeting first. Private. Off the books. Just him and the man who'd handed him the truth. Draven arrived at the building's underground garage at 5 a.m. No security. No entourage. Just a long black coat and the kind of presence that made armed guards step back instinctively. Kael met him by the elevator. Alone. They didn't shake hands. "You didn't tell anyone I'm here," Draven said, not a question. "No." Smart. They rode the elevator in silence. 30 floors. Tension thick enough to choke on. 2 alphas in a confined space. Both dangerous. Both calculating. The doors opened to Kael's private office. Minimalist. Expensive. A desk that cost more than cars. Windows showing the city waking up. Draven walked to the window, hands in pockets. "Nice view. Why did you really give me the drive?" Draven turned. His expression was unreadable. "I told you, I don't tolerate lies. That's not enough. It is for me." Kael stepped closer. Not aggressive, but not backing down. "You run a syndicate. You launder money through fashion brands across 3 states. You've killed people. Allegedly. You don't do favors." "No," Draven agreed. "I don't. So what do you want?" Silence stretched. Then Draven smiled, cold, sharp. "I want you to understand something, Kael. 3 years ago, someone used my name. Let you hunt me. Let you waste resources. Let you believe I was the threat." He moved closer. Not threatening. Just present. "That," Draven continued, "is disrespect, and I don't forget disrespect." Kael's jaw tightened. "So this is revenge. This is clarity." Draven's eyes were ice. "Orion played you, used your Omega, hurt your child, and hid behind your own company while doing it. And you want me to destroy him. I want you to take back your empire." Draven's voice dropped. "Because right now, you don't control it. He does. And men like him don't stop until they own everything." The words hit like a fist. Because Draven was right. Orion had been making moves, subtle ones, board votes that shifted power, investors he'd cultivated personally, merger clauses that looked protective but weren't. If Kael resigned due to scandal or instability, Orion would step in. Seamlessly, legally, and Vale Industries would become his. "You're saying he's still playing," Kael said quietly. "I'm saying he never stopped." Kael turned away, stared out the window, Manhattan spreading below like a game board. "Why do you care?" he asked. Draven was quiet for a moment. Then, "I told you. I know what it means to protect an Omega carrying your future." Kael looked back. You have had. Draven's face went blank. Past tense. Understanding crashed through Kael. Draven had lost someone. An Omega, maybe a child, maybe both. That's why he recognized the stakes. Why he understood the fear. Why he'd crossed enemy lines to deliver evidence. Not kindness, recognition. One alpha seeing another about to lose everything. I'm sorry, Kael said. Draven's expression didn't change. Don't be. Just don't make my mistakes. He moved toward the elevator, stopped at the door. The board meeting today. Orion will push for a vote on your leadership stability. He's been building support for weeks. If it passes, you're out. Kael's hands curled into fists. How do you know? Because I make it my business to know things. Draven pressed the elevator button. You have two choices. Go public with the evidence and watch your company collapse, or handle it quietly and keep your empire intact. Quietly how? The elevator doors opened. Draven stepped inside, turned. You're a billionaire, Kael. You know how to make problems disappear. The doors closed. Kael stood alone in his office while the sun rose over Manhattan. Handle it quietly. He knew what that meant. Not murder. He wasn't Draven. But there were other ways to destroy a man. Legal ways, financial ways. Ways that left no blood but took everything. His phone buzzed. Text from Jorah. Amari asked about you. Kael's chest tightened. Asked, not spoke. Because Amari still wasn't talking, just gestured, pointed, used his eyes to communicate what his voice couldn't. Another text. Be careful. Kael typed back. Always. He pocketed his phone, straightened his tie, walked to his desk, and pulled up the files his security team had compiled. Orion's entire life. Mapped, documented, vulnerable. The board meeting started in 3 hours. Kael had two choices. Burn everything to expose the truth, or play the game better than Orion ever could. He made his decision. Then he made a call. Not to his lawyers, to someone else. Someone who understood that sometimes justice didn't happen in courtrooms. Sometimes it happened in underground parking garages and offshore account seizures and anonymous tips to federal investigators. Sometimes it happened in shadows, and if Kael was going to protect his family, he needed to learn how to operate there. The call connected. I need a favor, Kael said. Draven's voice came through cold and amused. I don't do favors. Then call it an alliance. Silence. Then, now you're learning. The Connecticut hospital room looked the same as yesterday. White walls, beeping monitors. Jorah in the bed, one hand on his belly, eyes closed but not sleeping. Kael stood in the doorway holding takeout from the Thai place Jorah used to love. Used to. Before food started tasting like ash, before anxiety made eating feel like drowning. You need to eat, Kael said quietly. Jorah's eyes opened, tired. I will. You said that yesterday. And I ate yesterday. 3 bites. Jorah didn't respond, just shifted slightly, wincing. 30 weeks pregnant. High risk. Every day the baby stayed inside was a victory. Every contraction was a countdown. Kael set the food on the table, pulled a chair close. The board meeting happened. Jorah's hand stilled on his stomach. And? Orion pushed for the vote. Leadership stability. Confidence measure. Did it pass? No. Relief flickered across Jorah's face. How? Kael leaned back, loosened his tie. I called in favors, reminded certain board members about certain investments, made it clear that voting against me would be financially unwise. It wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was messier. The whole truth involved Draven making calls to offshore accounts that held board members' hidden assets, subtle threats, nothing overt, just enough pressure to shift votes. The whole truth was that Kael had let a Mafia king influence his company's leadership. But Jorah didn't need to know that. Not yet. Not while he was 30 weeks pregnant and barely holding together. Jorah studied him, those two perceptive eyes. What aren't you telling me? Nothing. Kael. I handled it. That's what matters. Jorah's jaw tightened. He turned away, stared at the window. I hate this. Hate what? Being useless. Lying here while you fight alone. Kael reached out, stopped himself. Jorah flinched at touch. Even gentle touch. Even loving touch. 3 years of fear had rewired something fundamental. You're not useless, Kael said. You're keeping our child alive. Your child. The correction was automatic, reflexive. Kael's chest ached. Our child, Jorah. You don't have to. I'm not pretending. Kael's voice hardened. I don't care about biology. I don't care what anyone says. This baby is mine. Amari is mine. You are mine. Jorah's breathing hitched. People think. I don't care what people think. The board can go to hell. Silence dropped between them. Heavy. Painful. Then Jorah laughed. Small. Broken. You sound like him. Kael froze. Who? Draven. The name landed like a grenade. Kael kept his face neutral. Why would you say that? Because you're talking like someone who doesn't care about rules anymore. Jorah finally looked at him. And that scares me. It should. Because Jorah was right. Something had shifted in Kael over the past 48 hours. Some line he'd been careful not to cross. Some boundary between legal and necessary. He'd always operated in gray areas. Every billionaire did. Tax strategies, offshore holdings, NDAs. But there were limits. Lines he didn't cross. Until now. Now he was taking advice from a Mafia king. Using threats instead of negotiations. Playing a game where the rules didn't matter as much as winning. Because winning meant keeping Jorah safe. Keeping Amari safe. Keeping this fragile family intact. And if that required becoming someone he didn't recognize, so be it. I'm doing what I have to, Kael said quietly. At what cost? Whatever it takes. Jorah's eyes filled. He turned away again. That's what I'm afraid of. The monitor beeped. Steady, for now. Kael's phone buzzed. Text from his security team. Orion requesting private meeting. Says urgent. Kael stared at the message. Orion knew something. Had to. The vote failed too cleanly. Board members who'd been loyal to him suddenly switched sides. He was smart enough to recognize a pattern. Smart enough to know someone had interfered. Meeting him now would be dangerous. But refusing would show fear. And Kael couldn't afford to show fear. He typed back, "Where?" The response, his office. 1 hour. Kael stood, kissed the top of Jorah's head. I have to go. Kael, I'll be back tonight. Please don't do anything. I won't. Another lie. Because Kael was absolutely going to do something stupid. He just hoped he survived it. Orion's office was smaller than Kael's, less windows, more shadows, the kind of space that felt like it was designed for secrets. Orion sat behind his desk, calm, smiling, like nothing had changed. Kael, thanks for coming. Kael didn't sit. What do you want? Direct, I appreciate that. Orion leaned back. I wanted to discuss the board vote. What about it? It was unexpected. Votes go both ways. True. Orion's smile didn't reach his eyes. But these particular votes shifted very suddenly, almost like someone applied pressure. Kael kept his face blank. Are you accusing me of something? I'm observing patterns. Orion stood. Walked to the window. You've been making interesting alliances lately. Kael's pulse jumped. Meaning? Meaning I have eyes everywhere, Kael, including parking garages. The air went cold. Orion turned, still smiling. You met with Draven, 5 a.m. underground. Very clandestine. Kael's mind raced. Security footage. Of course, Orion would have access. He was CFO. He controlled budgets, contracts, surveillance systems. So? Kael said evenly. So, Orion continued. That's an interesting choice. Given that Draven has been your enemy for 3 years. Maybe I was wrong about him. Or maybe he offered you something you couldn't refuse. Kael stepped closer. What do you want, Orion? Orion's smile finally dropped. I want you to understand your position. You think you won today. You didn't. You bought time. But time runs out. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Orion moved to his desk, pulled out a folder, slid it across. Merger clause, page 47. Read it. Kael opened the folder, scanned the page. His blood went cold. Leadership instability provision. If the CEO demonstrates sustained inability to maintain company stability due to personal circumstances, board may initiate emergency restructuring. Personal circumstances. Omega scandal, child trauma, pregnancy complications. Everything that had happened over 3 years. Everything Orion had orchestrated. This was always the plan, Kael said quietly. This was always insurance. Orion took the folder back. I didn't create your problems, Kael. I just made sure they'd be useful when needed. Rage burned through Kael's chest. You tried to kill Jorah. I created an opportunity for change. You traumatized my son. Collateral damage. Kael's hands curled into fists. Every instinct screamed to lunge across the desk. Breakbone, make Orion hurt the way Amari hurt. But that's what Orion wanted. Violence, loss of control, proof of instability. So Kael smiled instead. Cold, dangerous. You made a mistake. Orion raised an eyebrow. Did I? You told me your plan. Because it's already in motion. Nothing you do now changes it. We'll see. Kael walked to the door. Stopped. Looked back. One more thing. That surveillance footage from 3 years ago. Traffic cam, New Jersey highway. Orion's face went pale. I have it, Kael continued. Every angle, including the one showing your face behind the wheel. You're bluffing. Try me. Kael left, walked to the elevator, pressed the button. His phone buzzed immediately. Text from Orion. You go public with that footage, your company dies. Kael typed back. So does yours. Another buzz, this time from Draven. He'll move fast now. Be ready. Kael stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and somewhere in a hospital in Connecticut, Jorah's monitor started beeping faster. Contractions. Real ones this time. The emergency room doors slammed open at 11:23 p.m. Kael ran through them carrying Jorah in his arms. 30 weeks pregnant. Face twisted in pain. Water breaking in the car 20 minutes ago. Contractions every 3 minutes now. Too fast. Too early. Too wrong. Nurses swarmed immediately. Wheelchair appeared. Hands reached for Jorah, but Kael couldn't let go. Couldn't release him. Couldn't. Sir, we need to take him now. Kael's arms loosened. Jorah slipped into the wheelchair, eyes squeezed shut, one hand gripping his stomach, the other reaching back for Kael. Their fingers touched for half a second. Then Jorah disappeared through double doors marked Authorized Personnel Only. Kael stood frozen in the hallway, blood on his Tom Ford suit from where Jorah had gripped his shoulder, heart hammering against ribs, phone buzzing in his pocket with messages he couldn't read because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. A nurse touched his arm. "Sir, is there someone we can call?" Amari. The thought hit like lightning. Amari was still at the penthouse with the nanny, still clutching his toy airplane, still silent, still waiting for parents who kept disappearing into hospitals and emergencies and fear. Kael pulled out his phone and dialed his head of security. "Get Amari. Bring him here. Now." "Sir, it's almost midnight. I don't care what time it is. Bring my son." He hung up, paced the hallway, checked his watch. 11:27 p.m., 3 hours since he'd left Orion's office. 3 hours since the threat became real. 3 hours since everything started collapsing. His phone buzzed again. Text from his assistant. Illinois financial authorities received anonymous tip about shell companies registered to Orion Cade. Investigation opening tomorrow. Kael stared at the message. He hadn't sent that tip, which meant Draven had, moving pieces without permission, taking action, accelerating the timeline. Another text, this one from an unknown number. "Your CFO is about to have a very bad week. You're welcome. Draven." Kael wanted to be angry, wanted to feel violated. His company, his decisions, his control. But all he felt was relief, because Orion was about to be buried under federal investigations, and Kael hadn't had to pull the trigger himself, hadn't had to choose between justice and empire. Draven had chosen for him. A doctor appeared in the hallway. Dr. Chen, the same one from yesterday. Calm face, tired eyes. Kael's stomach dropped. "Is he stable for now?" She gestured toward chairs. "Sit." He didn't want to sit. Wanted to break through those doors and be with Jorah. But his legs moved anyway. Autopilot. Survival mode. Dr. Chen sat across from him. "The contractions are real. We've administered medication to try to slow them. But at 30 weeks, if we can't stop the labor, we'll need to deliver." "Is the baby viable?" "Yes. 30 weeks is early, but with NICU care, survival rates are high. Survival rates, not certainty. Rates, statistics, percentages, chances." Kael's hands curled into fists. What caused this? Stress, physical, emotional. His body is responding to sustained high cortisol levels. She paused. Has something happened recently? Something traumatic? Everything. The park. Draven. The surveillance footage. Orion's threats. The board vote. The revelation that the man who'd tried to kill Jorah was still walking free, still smiling, still planning. But Kael couldn't say any of that. So he just nodded. Work stress. Dr. Chen's expression said she didn't believe him, but she didn't push. He needs absolute calm. No visitors except immediate family. No phone calls, no decisions. Nothing that elevates his heart rate. How long? Until the baby is born. However long that takes. She stood. You can see him in 20 minutes. 5 minutes only. She left. Kael sat alone in the waiting room while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Other people filtered through. Crying children, elderly couples, a man with a broken arm. Life continuing like the world wasn't ending. His phone buzzed. Text from his head of security. Amari on the way. ETA 15 minutes. Another buzz. This one from Draven. Federal investigation will pull Orion's attention away from you. Use the time. Kael typed back, I didn't ask for this. Response, you didn't have to. Kael stared at the screen, then typed, what do you want in return? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, nothing you can give me. The message felt final, heavy. Kael pocketed his phone, leaned back, closed his eyes, and tried not to think about what Draven had lost. What kind of Omega? What kind of child? What kind of future that made a Mafia king cross enemy lines to protect someone else's family? Footsteps approached, small ones. Kael opened his eyes. Amari stood 3 feet away, silver hair messy from sleep, blue eyes wide. Toy airplane clutched against his chest. The nanny hovered behind him, uncertain. Kael opened his arms. Amari ran into them, small body, warm, trembling. Kael held him tight, breathed in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. Jorah's okay, Kael whispered. He's going to be okay. Amari pulled back, looked up at him with those 2 knowing eyes, then reached out and touched Kael's face, one small hand on his cheek, and whispered, Papa scared. 2 words. The first words in 3 years that weren't just Papa. Kael's breath stopped. Yeah, buddy. Papa's scared. Amari nodded, like he understood, like fear was something he recognized intimately. Then he tucked his head against Kael's chest and went still. The nanny stepped forward. Should I? Go home, Kael said quietly. I've got him. She hesitated, then nodded and left. Kael sat in the waiting room holding his son while minutes crawled past. 15 became 20. 20 became 30. No doctor appeared. No updates. Just silence and fluorescent light, and the weight of a child who'd learned too young that the world was dangerous. Then a nurse appeared. Mr. Vale, you can see him now. Kael stood, Amari still in his arms. Can he come? The nurse glanced at Amari, then at Kael's face. Whatever she saw there made her nod. 5 minutes, and keep him quiet. They walked through the double doors, down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear, into a room where Jorah lay in a bed with monitors attached to his belly, tracking 2 heartbeats, his and the baby's. Jorah's eyes were closed, face pale, exhausted. Kael moved to the bedside, set Amari down carefully. The boy climbed onto the chair, still clutching his airplane. Jorah, Kael said softly. No response. Baby, I'm here. Jorah's eyes opened, glazed. Kael? Right here. The baby. Still inside, fighting, just like you. Jorah's hand moved to his stomach. Protective, automatic. I can't lose another one. The words cut like glass, because 3 years ago, in the crash, Jorah had been pregnant. 4 months. They'd planned to announce it after the gala. But the crash took that. And the fear of losing this one was written in every line of Jorah's face. Kael took his hand, squeezed gently. You won't. I promise. You can't promise that. Watch me. Amari reached out, small hand touching Jorah's arm. Jorah looked at him, tears sliding down his cheeks. Hey, baby. Amari didn't speak, just held his airplane up, offering it. Jorah's face crumpled. You keep it safe for me, okay? Amari nodded, then leaned forward and pressed his forehead against Jorah's shoulder and whispered, Love you. 3 words. Jorah's breath hitched. He looked at Kael, eyes wide with shock. Kael felt his own eyes burn. He's been talking. A little. Since when? Tonight. Jorah pulled Amari closer with one arm, kissed the top of his head. I love you too, sweetheart. The monitor beeped. Steady. Both heartbeats strong. For now. The nurse appeared in the doorway. Time's up. Kael nodded. She gently extracted Amari from Jorah's arms. We'll be in the waiting room. Don't leave, Jorah whispered. Never. They left the room, walked back to the waiting area. Amari curled up on 2 chairs, using Kael's jacket as a blanket. Fell asleep almost immediately. Kael sat beside him, checked his phone. 7 new messages, all from board members, all panicking about the federal investigation into Orion. 1 message from his assistant. Orion's assets frozen, travel restricted. He's being questioned. And 1 from Draven. The dominoes are falling. Kael typed back. He'll know I'm involved. Response. Let him. Another message. Men like him only respect power. Show him yours. Kael stared at the words. Then another text came through. This one from Orion himself. You think you've won? You haven't? I still have 1 card left. Kael's blood went cold. He typed back, What card? No response. Kael stood, walked to the window, stared out at the parking lot while his mind raced. What card? What leverage? What final move could Orion possibly? His phone rang. Unknown number. Kael answered. What? A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. Mr. Vale? Who is this? My name is Agent Taryn Cross, FBI. I need you to come to our field office immediately. Kael's stomach dropped. Why? We have evidence suggesting you conspired with a known criminal organization to manipulate federal investigations. The world tilted. Orion's final card. He'd flipped the script, made Kael the criminal, turned the investigation around. That's not true, Kael said carefully. Then you'll have no problem answering questions. Her voice was steel. We can do this cooperatively, or we can come to you. Kael looked at Amari sleeping in the chair, at the double doors hiding Jorah, at the empire he'd built that was about to collapse. I'll be there in an hour, he said. He hung up, texted Draven, FBI knows. Response came immediately. I know. Kael typed, Did you set me up? 3 dots. Then, no. But Orion's smarter than we thought. Another message. Don't go to the FBI. Kael stared at the text, then typed, I have to. Response. Then you've already lost. The penthouse security system showed the breach at 3:47 a.m. Kael watched the footage on his phone from the hospital waiting room. Main entrance secure. Side entrance secure. Rooftop access. Movement. A shadow crossing the terrace. Too deliberate to be wind. Too careful to be accident. Someone was inside his home. Kael's blood turned to ice. He'd left the penthouse empty. When security team outside, cameras active, alarms armed, but someone had gotten through anyway. His phone buzzed. Text from his head of security. Alarm disabled from inside. Someone used your access code. Impossible. Only 3 people had that code. Kael, Jorah, and no. Kael's breath stopped. He pulled up the camera feed from Amari's room. Empty. Bed made. Toy chest closed. Bathroom, empty. Living room, empty. Kitchen. A figure in black stood at the counter, holding something small. Kael zoomed in. A child's toy airplane. The same one Amari had been carrying for 3 years. The same one he'd offered to Jorah earlier tonight. The same one that was supposed to be in Amari's backpack. But the backpack was still in the waiting room, right where Amari had left it. Which meant this airplane was different. A copy. Kael's mind raced. Someone had broken into his home, used his code, left a replica of his son's most precious possession. Message received. We can reach your child anytime we want. Rage burned through Kael's chest. He stood, grabbed his jacket, started toward the exit. A hand caught his arm. He spun, ready to fight. Draven stood there, long black coat, expressionless face. Don't. Someone's in my house. I know. Then why are you stopping me? Because they want you to go there. Draven's grip tightened. It's a trap. I don't care. You should. Draven pulled him aside, away from sleeping Amari. Orion sent someone to plant evidence. The FBI is probably already on their way. You show up there, they find you with whatever was planted, and you're done. Kael tried to pull free. He threatened my son. He threatened the idea of your son. There's a difference. Draven's eyes were cold. Amari is here. Safe. The airplane is a symbol. Nothing more. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Draven released him. Because I've played this game longer than you, and I know how men like Orion operate. They don't want your child dead. They want you destroyed. Kael's hands shook. What do I do? You let me handle the penthouse. How? By doing what I do best. Draven pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quietly in a language Kael didn't recognize. Hung up. My people will clean it. Remove whatever was planted. Reset your security. Orion will think the FBI found nothing because you were tipped off. That makes me look guilty. You already look guilty. The question is whether you're guilty and free or guilty and in prison. The logic was airtight, and it made Kael sick. Because this was the cost. This was what happened when you made deals with men like Draven. You gave up control, gave up certainty, gave up the ability to fight your battles yourself. You became dependent. Why are you helping me? Kael asked. Draven was quiet for a moment. Then, because I know what it's like to lose everything while thinking you're protecting it. His voice carried weight that had nothing to do with the present. Kael studied him. What happened to your Omega? Draven's face went blank. That's not your concern. You made it my concern when you involved yourself in my life. Silence stretched. Then Draven turned toward the window, hands in pockets. Her name was Zire, 7 months pregnant. Someone came after me. Used her as leverage. Kael's chest tightened. What did you do? I chose wrong. Draven's voice was flat, but empty. I thought I could save her by giving them what they wanted. Information, money, territory. He paused. They killed her anyway. The words hung in the air like smoke. How long ago? Kael asked quietly. 5 years. And the child? Died with her. Kael felt the loss like a physical blow. I'm sorry. Don't be. Draven turned back. His eyes were ice. Just don't make my mistakes. When someone threatens your family, you don't negotiate. You eliminate. I can't just... Yes, you can. Draven stepped closer. You're a billionaire. You have resources, power, influence. Stop acting like you're helpless. I'm not helpless. Then prove it. Draven's voice dropped. Orion is moving against you on multiple fronts. FBI, board, media. He's coordinated, professional. And he won't stop until you're destroyed. So what do I do? You hit back harder. Kael's jaw tightened. I'm not a killer. I'm not asking you to be. Draven pulled out his phone, showed Kael a photo. This is Orion's private server, located in Maryland. Contains every communication, every transaction, every piece of evidence you need to bury him legally. How do you know? Because I make it my business to know. Draven pocketed the phone. My people can access it, extract everything. Deliver it to federal prosecutors through channels that can't be traced back to you. That's illegal. So is attempted murder. Kael stared at him, at the man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself as something harder, something colder, something that survived. If I do this, Kael said slowly, I'm no different than him. You're right. Draven's expression didn't change. But you'll be alive, and your family will be safe. That's the only difference that matters. Footsteps approached. A nurse appeared. Mr. Vale, your Omega is asking for you. Kael turned, looked at Amari still sleeping in the chair, at the double doors hiding Jorah, at the choice he had to make. Play by rules that didn't protect him, or break them and survive. He looked back at Draven. Do it. Draven nodded once. Already in motion. When? Tonight. By morning, federal prosecutors will have everything. He started toward the exit, stopped. And Kael, when this is over, you owe me nothing. This debt is paid. What debt? Draven's smile was cold. The one I owed Zire, for failing her. He left. Kael stood alone in the hallway while the hospital hummed around him. Then he walked through the double doors to see Jorah. The room was dimmer now, monitors still beeping. Jorah's eyes were open but glazed with exhaustion. Hey, Kael said softly. Hey, how are you feeling? Like my body is trying to kill me. Jorah shifted slightly, winced. The contractions slowed, but they haven't stopped. Kael sat beside the bed, took his hand. You're doing great. I'm terrified. Me too. Jorah's fingers tightened around his. I heard you on the phone, in the hallway. Kael's stomach dropped. You were sleeping. I was listening. Jorah's eyes met his. You're working with Draven, no point lying. Yes. Why? Because Orion is trying to destroy us, and I can't fight him alone. So you made a deal with a criminal. I made a deal with someone who understands how to win. Kael leaned closer. I know you're scared. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I'm doing what I have to do to keep you safe. At what cost? Whatever it takes. Jorah pulled his hand away, turned his face to the wall. You sound like him. Maybe I need to. No. Jorah's voice cracked. You don't. Because if you become him, then we've already lost. The words hit like a hammer. Because Jorah was right. This was the edge. The moment where Kael could still step back. Still choose the legal path. Still believe in systems and justice and rules. Or he could cross over. Become someone who operated in shadows. Who made impossible choices. Who survived at any cost. The monitor beeped faster. Jorah gasped, a hand flying to his stomach. Kael stood. What's wrong? Contraction. The beeping accelerated, alarm sounding. Nurses flooded the room. Dr. Chen appeared, checked the monitors. Her face went serious. We need to deliver now, she said. Baby's heart rate is dropping. Kael's world stopped. What? Emergency C-section. We have to go now. They wheeled Jorah toward the door. Kael tried to follow, but a nurse blocked him. You have to wait here. Like hell. Sir, please. Her face was kind but firm. Let us do our job. The doors closed. Kael stood alone in the room while his Omega disappeared down the hallway. 30 weeks. 10 weeks too early. A baby fighting for survival. And Kael could do nothing but wait. His phone buzzed. Text from Draven. Server accessed. Files extracted. Prosecutors will have everything by dawn. Another text. Orion's finished. Kael should have felt relief. Victory. Something. But all he felt was empty. Because what good was winning if Jorah and the baby didn't survive? What good was an empire if his family was gone? He sank into a chair, head in hands. And for the first time in 8 years, Kael Vale, billionaire, CEO, alpha, empire builder, prayed. The NICU smelled like plastic and hope. Kael stood outside the glass window at 6:43 a.m., watching a 2-pound baby breathe through machines. Tubes everywhere, wires, monitors, the smallest human he'd ever seen fighting the biggest battle, his son. Born at 4:17 a.m. emergency C-section, 30 weeks exactly, alive. Jorah was still in recovery, stable, exhausted. They'd let Kael see him for 60 seconds before wheeling him to a different floor. Long enough to see tears. Long enough to hear, "Is the baby?" Long enough to say, "He's perfect." A lie and a truth. Perfect because he existed. Because his heart was beating. Because he'd been pulled from Jorah's body and immediately started fighting. A lie because nothing about this was perfect. Nothing about 10 weeks too early. Nothing about machines breathing for him. Nothing about a future measured in hourly updates instead of years. Dr. Chen appeared beside Kael, still in surgical scrubs. He's strong. He's tiny. Strong and tiny aren't opposites. She gestured toward the incubator. He's breathing on his own. That's remarkable for 30 weeks. Most babies this early need ventilators. How long does he have to stay here? Minimum 6 weeks, maybe more. Depends on how he develops. 6 weeks. 42 days. 1,000 hours. Kael's phone buzzed. He ignored it. "You should get some rest," Dr. Chen said gently. "I'm fine. You've been awake for 36 hours. I said I'm fine." She studied him, then nodded. "There's a family room down the hall, private. You can bring your other son there." Amari. Kael had forgotten. For 5 seconds, he'd completely forgotten Amari was still in the waiting room. Guilt crashed through him. He turned, walked fast down the hallway, through doors, into the waiting area. Amari sat exactly where Kael had left him, still clutching the toy airplane. Eyes wide, face too serious for 5 years old. Kael knelt in front of him. "Hey, buddy." Amari stared at him, then asked the question that broke Kael's heart. "Did Jorah die?" "No." Kael pulled him close. "No, baby. Jorah's okay." "The baby?" "Your brother. He's here. He's little, but he's fighting." Amari pulled back. "Can I see?" "Not yet. He's in a special room, but soon." Amari nodded. Then, "What's his name?" Kael froze. They hadn't chosen a name, had been waiting. Superstition, maybe. Fear that naming him made him real, made losing him hurt more. But he was real now. 2 pounds. Fighting. Real. "I don't know yet," Kael admitted. "We have to ask Jorah." "Okay." Amari tucked himself against Kael's chest. Small, warm, alive, and Kael held him while the hospital moved around them. Nurses passing, families crying, life and death happening simultaneously in fluorescent hallways. His phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Finally, he checked. 17 new messages, 3 from board members, all saying the same thing. Orion arrested. FBI raid this morning. 5 from media outlets requesting comment, and 2 from his legal team asking for instructions, and 1 from Draven. It's done. Kael closed his eyes. Done. Orion was finished, arrested, evidence delivered. The man who'd tried to destroy his family was being destroyed himself. Kael should feel something. Relief, victory, justice. But all he felt was tired. So incredibly tired. A nurse appeared. "Mr. Vale, Jorah is awake. He's asking for you." Kael stood, took Amari's hand. They followed her through hallways to a different room. Jorah lay in a bed, pale, exhausted, bandaged, but alive. His eyes found Kael immediately. "The baby! Alive! Breathing! Strong!" Jorah's face crumpled. Relief or grief or both. "I want to see him. Soon. They're monitoring him. I need to see him now." "Jorah, I lost one, Kael." His voice broke. "I lost one 3 years ago, and I never got to hold them. And I never got to—" He couldn't finish. Kael moved to the bed, sat carefully beside him. "I'll get you a wheelchair. We'll go together. Promise?" "Promise." 20 minutes later, they wheeled Jorah down the hallway, Kael pushing, Amari walking beside them, a fragile procession toward the NICU. The nurses let them in. Jorah stared through the glass at the tiny baby in the incubator. Tubes and wires and beeping machines. "He's so small," Jorah whispered. "He's perfect." "Can I—" Jorah looked at the nurse. "Can I touch him?" She smiled. "Yes, but you have to scrub first." They helped Jorah into a sterile gown, helped him to the incubator, showed him how to reach through the small openings. Jorah's hand trembled as he touched the baby's chest, fingers so much bigger than the tiny body. The baby shifted, small movement, and Jorah broke, tears streaming down his face, silent sobs, years of grief and fear and loss pouring out. Kael held him, let him cry, let him release everything he'd been holding since the crash, since the miscarriage, since 3 years of silence and fear. Amari stood beside them, watching, processing. Then he reached up and touched Jorah's arm and said, "He's okay. We're all okay." Full sentence, clear, confident. Jorah looked down at Amari, then at Kael, then back at the baby. "What do we name him?" he whispered. Kael thought about battles fought, about empires defended, about impossible choices and shadow alliances and the cost of survival. "Zire," he said quietly. "It means river, something that keeps flowing no matter what tries to stop it." Jorah's hand rested on the incubator. "Zire." The baby's tiny fingers curled. And somewhere across the city, federal agents walked Orion Cade out of his office in handcuffs. Somewhere, board members scrambled to distance themselves from scandal. Somewhere, media outlets published stories about corporate fraud and attempted murder and fallen executives. But in the NICU, none of that mattered. What mattered was a 2-pound baby named Zire. What mattered was Amari speaking again. What mattered was Jorah still breathing. What mattered was family. Kael's phone buzzed one last time. Text from Draven. "Congratulations on your son." Kael typed back, "Thank you. For everything." Response. "Don't thank me. Just protect them." Another message. "And Kael? We're Ivan now. Don't contact me again unless you're ready to pay a different price." The message felt final. A door closing. An alliance ending. Kael pocketed his phone. He turned back to his family. Jorah holding Amari while watching Zire through glass. Imperfect. Fragile. Scarred. But alive. All of them. Alive. 6 weeks later, the boardroom felt different. Same glass table, same leather chairs, same Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. But the people were different. 3 board members had resigned. 2 more were being investigated. Orion's chair sat empty. He was awaiting trial in a federal facility in Illinois, facing charges of attempted murder, corporate fraud, and conspiracy. The empire had survived. Barely. Stock prices had dropped 17% before recovering. Investors had panicked before calming. Media had swarmed before moving on. Vale Industries was still standing. But it was different now. and so was Kael. He stood at the head of the table addressing the remaining board members. Calm, controlled, wearing a Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But underneath, he was exhausted. 6 weeks of splitting time between the office and NICU. 6 weeks of watching Zire fight for every breath. 6 weeks of supporting Jorah through recovery. 6 weeks of helping Amari adjust to being a big brother. 6 weeks of surviving. The merger with Helix Corp is moving forward, Kael said. New terms, new leadership, new timeline. Questions? Silence. No one challenged him anymore, because they'd all seen what happened to people who did. The meeting ended. Board members filed out. Kael stood alone in the room, staring at Orion's empty chair. He should feel victorious. He felt hollow. His phone buzzed. Text from Jorah. Zire hit 4 pounds. Doctor says maybe 2 more weeks. Relief flooded through him. 4 pounds. Double what he'd been at birth. Strong, fighting, surviving. Another text. Come home for dinner? Kael smiled, typed back, on my way. He grabbed his coat, headed toward the elevator, and stopped. Draven stood in the hallway. Long black coat, expressionless face, like a ghost appearing from nowhere. Kael's heart jumped. What are you doing here? We need to talk. I thought we were done. So did I. Draven gestured toward Kael's office. 5 minutes. They walked inside. Kael closed the door. What do you want? Draven moved to the window, hands in pockets. Orion had insurance. Kael's stomach dropped. What kind? The kind that names me as your co-conspirator, from the kind that makes federal prosecutors very interested in our relationship. That's impossible. You covered your tracks. I did. But Orion's smarter than we thought. Draven turned. He had a backup server, hidden. My people missed it. What's on it? Surveillance footage, from the park, from your building garage, from the hospital. Draven's voice was flat. Timestamps, locations, evidence of our meetings. Kael's blood went cold. Can you destroy it? Already tried. It's in federal custody. Then we're both. No. Draven stepped closer. You're protected. You're a legitimate businessman being extorted by a criminal. That's the story. And you? I'm the criminal who gets arrested to make it believable. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kael stared at him, like you're turning yourself in. I'm controlling the narrative. Draven's expression didn't change. I'll plead to racketeering, money laundering, maybe conspiracy, but nothing that touches you, nothing that threatens your family. Why would you do that? Because I told you. We're even. Draven moved toward the door. And because I know what it means to lose everything. I won't let that happen to you. Kael grabbed his arm. There has to be another way. There isn't. I can get lawyers, the best lawyers. We can fight this. And drag your family through months of testimony, media coverage, federal investigations? Draven pulled free. No, this is cleaner. You'll go to prison. I've been in worse places. Kael's chest tightened. How long? 5 years. Maybe 7. Depends on the prosecutor. 5 years. 7 years. A lifetime. For crimes Draven committed to save Kael's family. I can't let you do this, Kael said. You don't have a choice. Draven opened the door, stopped. But I need something from you. Here it was. The price, the cost, the thing Draven actually wanted. What? Kael asked. Draven reached into his coat, pulled out a photograph, handed it to Kael, a young woman, beautiful, pregnant, smiling, Zara. When I'm inside, Draven said quietly, someone will come for my territory, my businesses, my empire. I need you to protect something for me. What? A foundation, in Zara's name, for pregnant omegas in dangerous situations. Medical care, legal support, safe housing. Kael stared at the photo. You want me to run a charity? I want you to make sure her death meant something. Draven's voice was hard. Can you do that? Kael looked at the woman in the photo, at the smile that would never age, at the child that never took a breath, at the reason Draven had saved them. Yes, Kael said. I can do that. Draven nodded once, took the photo back. Then we're done. He walked out. Kael stood alone in his office while the city hummed below. 24 hours later, Draven turned himself in. Media exploded. Mafia king arrested. Underground empire exposed. Federal prosecutors celebrating. Kael's name appeared in reports, briefly, as a victim. Someone who'd been manipulated by both Orion and Draven. The narrative held. The empire survived, and Kael went home to his family. The penthouse was different now. Warmer, louder, messier. Jorah sat on the couch with Zire in his arms, 6 weeks old, still tiny, but breathing on his own now. No more tubes, no more wires, just a baby. Amari sat beside them, toy airplane on his lap, talking. Full sentences, stories, questions. The silence had broken completely, replaced by a child discovering his voice again. Kael stood in the doorway watching them. His family, imperfect, scarred, held together by impossible choices and shadow alliances, but alive. All of them, alive. Jorah looked up, smiled. You're home. I'm home. Kael crossed the room, sat beside them, took Zire carefully. The baby fit in his palms. Tiny, warm, real. How was the office? Jorah asked. Complicated. When isn't it? Kael smiled, looked down at Zire, at Amari, at Jorah, and knew something with absolute certainty. He'd made the right choice. Every impossible decision, every shadow alliance, every line crossed. Right. Because they were here. Safe. Together. I love you, Kael said quietly. Jorah leaned his head on Kael's shoulder. I love you too. Amari climbed onto Kael's lap, careful of his baby brother. Can we watch a movie? Yeah, buddy, we can watch a movie. They settled on the couch, family of 4, watching cartoons while Manhattan glittered outside. And for the first time in 3 years, Kael felt something he'd forgotten existed. Peace. Not perfect peace. Not permanent peace. But peace. For now. That was enough. 2 years later. Central Park. Autumn. Golden leaves drifted through air that smelled like coffee and distant rain. The fountain splashed. Joggers passed. Tourists laughed. Normal. Beautifully, devastatingly normal. Kael knelt on grass in a casual jacket. No Tom Ford today. Just denim and comfort. His Rolex was gone, sold months ago to fund Zara's foundation, and he didn't miss it. In front of him, Amari chased Zire through fallen leaves. 7 years old and 2 years old. Brothers, laughing, playing, alive. Jorah sat on a bench nearby, reading, one hand on his stomach, pregnant again. 5 months this time, planned, wanted, joyful, no fear, no silence, no armor, just peace. Vale Industries had restructured. Kael had stepped back from day-to-day operations, hired a new CEO, stayed on as chairman, spent more time at home, more time with family, more time being present. The empire survived, smaller now, more focused, but alive, like everything else. His phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the pregnancy. Heard it from my lawyer. Kael's breath stopped. Draven. He'd been sentenced to 6 years, currently in a federal facility in Pennsylvania. Kael had visited once. Awkward, tense. Two men who'd shared an impossible alliance now separated by bars and choices. Draven had looked different, thinner, harder, but alive. They'd barely spoken. But Draven had asked about Zire, about Amari, about Jorah. And when Kael left, Draven had said one thing. You made the right choice. Not forgiveness, not friendship, just acknowledgement. Kael typed back, thank you. How are you? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then surviving, like always. Another message. The Foundation is doing good work. Zara would be proud. Kael's chest tightened. I'm glad. Response. Take care of them, Kael. All of them. Then, don't write again. It's better this way. The finality was clear. A door closing. An alliance ending permanently. Kael pocketed his phone, looked up, and froze. A man in a long coat stood near the fountain, hands in pockets. Watching. Not Draven, someone else. Older, gray hair, expensive shoes. Recognition crashed through Kael, founder emeritus of Vale Industries, the man who'd started the company 40 years ago, the man who'd retired to Florida, the man who, understanding hit like lightning. Not Orion, this man, the real architect. Orion had been the weapon, the tool, the insurance, but this man had been the hand. Kael stood slowly, body tense, ready. The founder smiled, raised a hand, gestured to the boys playing, then turned and walked away. Disappearing into the crowd. No threat, no confrontation, just a message. I was testing you. You passed. Kael's mind raced. The merger clause, the leadership stability provision, the carefully orchestrated chaos. All of it designed to see what Kael would choose. Empire or family, power or protection, ambition or love. And Kael had chosen. He'd stepped back, restructured, prioritized family over expansion. He'd chosen correctly. The founder's test was over. Vale Industries was truly his now. Jorah appeared beside him. Who was that? Kael looked at the fountain, at the space where the founder had stood. No one important. You're lying. I'm protecting you. Jorah's hand found his. I don't need protection anymore. Kael looked at him, at the man who'd survived humiliation and crashes and fear, at the Omega who'd fought through early labor and loss and silence, at his partner, his equal. I know, Kael said quietly, but I'm going to protect you anyway. Jorah smiled. Okay. They stood together watching their sons play. Amari was teaching Zire how to make the toy airplane fly. Careful, patient, gentle. The older brother protecting the younger, the cycle continuing. And Kael understood something fundamental. Power without protection was meaningless. Empires without family were empty. Wealth without love was worthless. He'd built Vale Industries into an $8 billion empire, commanded boardrooms, crushed competitors, dominated markets. But this, watching his sons laugh, holding his pregnant Omega's hand, standing in a park on an autumn afternoon, this was the only empire that mattered, the only kingdom worth defending, the only legacy worth leaving. 3 years ago, he'd brought Amari to this park believing they were finally safe. He'd been wrong. Safety wasn't something you achieved once. It was something you fought for daily. Something you protected constantly. Something you earned through impossible choices and shadow alliances and sacrifices. But standing here now, watching golden leaves fall while his family laughed, Kael finally understood. They weren't safe because threats were gone. They were safe because Kael had learned to recognize them, to fight them, to eliminate them, and to build something stronger than fear. Amari ran over. "Papa, watch this!" He threw the toy airplane. It soared, graceful, perfect. Zire clapped. "Again!" Amari grinned, ran to retrieve it. Jorah leaned his head on Kael's shoulder. "We made it." "Yeah," Kael whispered. "We did." His phone buzzed one last time. Message from Zara's foundation. 300 Omegas housed safely this year. 15 successful pregnancies. 0 casualties. Kael closed his eyes. Draven's legacy. Zara's memory. Lives saved. Futures protected. Most people would never know how close this empire came to falling. How close Kael came to losing everything. How many impossible choices were made in shadows. How many lines were crossed. How many prices were paid. Most people would never know, but Kael would, and he'd carry it. The weight of choices made, the cost of survival, the debt owed to a Mafia king who sacrificed freedom to protect strangers. He'd carry it all, and he'd make it worth something. By being present, by protecting fiercely, by choosing family over empire every single day, by teaching his sons that true power wasn't dominance, it was loyalty, it was love. It was standing between danger and the people who couldn't fight, and never, ever backing down. Autumn shifted toward winter. The park emptied slowly, families heading home, and Kael Vale, billionaire, alpha, father, gathered his sons and his Omega and walked toward the future. Not perfect, not safe, but together. And that was enough. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemies. It's choosing what you're willing to become to protect the people you love. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more stories that inspire. Share your thoughts in the comments below and inspire others with your journey. What would you sacrifice to protect your family?